All right, welcome everyone, friends and members of the Beidam community and everyone else joining us tonight. We're here to observe Tisha B'Av, the traditional day of mourning for the destruction of the temples, and we'll say more as far as Kavanah, intention for our program here tonight. The way things are going to run is like this. We'll open with a nigun, a reflective melody without any words. You're welcome to sing along with me and use it as an opportunity to ground yourself, set up your space, set up your area. You can see I'm already seated on the floor. It's a traditional way to be on Tisha B'Av. You can make your own choices about what sort of bodily position you want, but you're going to want to make sure you're in a place where you can be both comfortable and a little bit uncomfortable for about an hour, and in a place that's quiet and is going to allow you to reflect without distraction. Like I said, we'll begin with a nigun. I'm going to share some words of kavanah, some intention setting about what it is we're doing here tonight. I want to tell you too, I'm trying something a little bit new for me. I think, given that we are observing Tisha B'Av as I have never observed Tisha B'Av before, or ever hope to again. It's an opportunity for something a little bit more tactile. So I know there's yet more folks who've clicked in since the last time I said this, but part of our ritual tonight will involve a rock. I have one that my daughter picked out for me from our garden. So if you don't have one, that's okay. But if you want to duck out and grab one for your yard or your garden or wherever you can find a small stone, anything like that to handle in your hands, that's going to be part of our reflection and our ritual tonight. So like I said, nigun, kavanah, some reflection involving those rocks and some teaching and learning and discussing and sharing together, which I've prepared, and I'll have a screen share up with both texts and images for us. And after that, we'll move into the reading of Eicha, the book of Lamentations. And I believe, JJ, you're the first one to go. Amy B. or Rachel, if you want to say anything to introduce the reading, you're welcome to do that. Otherwise, we can go ahead and turn it over to Jayanti to begin our reading. And we'll close the ritual with the stones concludes at the end of our evening tonight. So I encourage you to stick around for that as well. You'll miss the kind of key piece if you don't stay to the end. I see some folks already have their lights down. That's just fine. I'm planning to get up and turn mine down when we move into the reading of Eicha. It's another traditional way to be. You can use the light from your screen or the light from a flashlight or candle to light your way. That's one thing we've got going for us this evening, is that I'm going to display the text of Eicha on the screen. So if you don't have one in front of you, you're welcome to read along. And with that, we'll move into a little bit of singing and a little bit of kavanah. Ya da da da. Ya da 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 da. Ya da 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 da. Ya da 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 da. Ya da 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 da. Ya da 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 da. Ya da da da. Ya da 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 da. Ya da da da. Ya da 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 da. Ya da 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 da. Ya da 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 da. Ya da 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 da. Ya da 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 da. Ya da da da. Ya da 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 da. Ya da da da. Ya da 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 da. Ya da 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 da. Ya da 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 da. Ya da 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 da. Ya da 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 da. Traditionally, Tisha B'Av was a dark day of mourning as we cried over our losses and bewailed our exile. In Tisha B'Av, we felt most keenly our sense of powerlessness and our feeling of separation from our spiritual center in our ancestral homeland. Is the day on which we acknowledge the emotional and spiritual pain of our people's exile. But today, we're no longer in exile. Our people have returned to our ancient homeland and rebuilt our towns and our cities. Those of us who live in the diaspora feel at home in our communities, living side by side with neighbors who consider us fellow citizens. We are no longer powerless. Our world has changed and our needs have changed. To speak to us today, Tisha B'Av can no longer be the day on which we remember all the evil that has happened to us. It needs to become the day on which we understand that despite our setbacks, our struggles, our real losses, and deep suffering, we, the Jewish people, have overcome the obstacles that fate has set before us. Our existence today is a triumph of our people's spirit. Any commemoration of Tisha B'Av that does not acknowledge this reality is inadequate. We no longer need only to find ways to mourn our losses. Our chief worry is not being crushed in our weakness, but becoming arrogant and careless with our privilege and our power. We need to enhance our sense of appreciation for the blessings that we have. We must not take for granted and foolishly lose all that for generations we could only hope to obtain in our dreams. According to the Talmud, the sin that caused the destruction of the Second Temple was sinat chinam, which is translated as baseless hatred, wanton hatred among Jews for one another. The rabbis viewed sinat chinam as an egregious sin. One dimension of Tisha B'Av is concern with the way we treat those around us in both speech and deed. In connecting Tisha B'Av with sinat chinam, the rabbis made this an occasion to contemplate the mitzvot ben adam lechavero, between a person and their fellow, between individuals and others around them. But the corruption was not only personal, it was national. So are many of the problems the world currently faces. Hunger caused by war and environmental abuse, homelessness resulting from shredding of governmental safety nets, a lack of minimally adequate healthcare because of the unfair distribution of resources, injustice and oppression resulting from systemic racism, business and government corruption driven by greed and lust for power in the face of global crisis. We may not fear divine retribution, but we have reason to fear the consequences of human actions. Tisha B'Av provides an opportunity to confront such issues and a resolve to take action to try to make things better. We therefore seek tonight to move beyond ritual just for its own sake, in order to motivate ourselves to repair our broken world and to act for the good of broader society. So as part of that effort, I asked you to take stones. Every one of ours is going to be different. We're going to take a few moments to reflect on our individual stones, individually and together. So as you take your stone in your hand, feel its weight. And I should say you're welcome to share responses either aloud to yourself with the mute button on, or if you'd like to say something to the group, you're welcome to take your mute button off and share it aloud with all of us. Considering the stone in your hand, what's its texture? Is it smooth? My stone is very smooth. Smooth stones are worn from the slow passage of time, or perhaps from violent agitation, wearing away any excess to allow your touch to slide smoothly across its surface. Is your stone jagged or rough? Jagged stones are broken fragments of a larger whole. What do you think has become of that whole? What larger piece did your stone used to belong to? Do you think maybe there's a matching impression in another stone somewhere where this one could fit back into? Rough stones abrade any softer surface that they touch. They retain their character, even as they pass from hand to hand and from place to place. Think about where you found your stone. Was it placed there intentionally, do you think? If so, what purpose might it have served in being placed there? Put your stone in one hand and squeeze it hard. It's okay if it breaks. Squeeze it as hard as you can. How does it feel pressed into your palm? Is there pain? Does it hurt because of some protruding edge? Or does it nestle comfortably? Squeeze hard once more, then release your grip. Open your hand. Have you changed your stone at all? How's it different now? Or has your stone changed you? Is there a lingering mark in your palm? Or soreness in your fingers? How are you different from encountering the stone? invite you to continue to contemplate your stones. I'm going to bring up a share screen here. So imagine coming across a whole pile of stones, just any old pile of stones. Play detective for a minute. What's your interpretation of a pile of stones? What's its meaning? What do you think happened there? What do you take yourself off of mute and share an idea? What do you think a pile of stones means?
It could be a marker.
What do you mean?
A path, maybe.
Oh, a path, sure. Sure, a marker of a path. Yeah, absolutely. What does that convey about how it got there?
Somebody was there before.
Good. Yeah, somebody could have put it there on purpose. Amy, go ahead.
I think of it as a symbol of connection, attempt for connection.
Connection to who or what?
Well, it could be to where the stone is placed, the site. It could be to something beyond the stone. Historically, and altars were made of stone.
Sure.
Altars attempt to reach beyond our reality. When we go to a grave, we leave a stone. Attempt,
Sure.
Same thing in a way.
Yeah, I called that picture up. This is a picture from the Mount of Olives, where there's a famous cemetery looking over towards the old city. You can see some of those stones placed on the grave. Yeah.
It's like a boulder.
What about, does every pile of stones imply that someone put it there on purpose? Is there any other possible interpretation?
It could be from a landslide.
Sure. Yeah. Sure, from a landslide or from something, something that collapsed. Absolutely, right?
Mm-hmm.
Susan, was that what you were going to say too? I saw Susan come off of mute. Richard or Sari, go ahead.
I was just thinking sometimes if there's a flood or a river and then it rise up, it can leave a bunch of stones close together.
Yeah.
I was thinking,
Susan, you're back. Go ahead.
Yeah, it can be from an ancient glacier that deposited stones and rocks.
Yeah, if that's the case, then thinking someone put it there on purpose leads you pretty far astray, right?
Right.
Leah, what were you going to say?
well, I was just thinking, I don't know if it's not on purpose, but sometimes there are stones when people want to build a house.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of clearing the way for something new.
Interesting. That's interesting. That fits between the two sort of paradigms, I imagine. Jayanti, did you want to share something?
I was just going to add to that, or when you clear the stones from a field to plant.
Oh, sure. You might find the pile of cleared stones for planting. Yeah. Okay. Anyone else want to share something about what you imagine, what your sort of detective mind detects when you encounter a pile of stones? Ken, go ahead.
Yeah, I like what Leah said. I picked up a stone from the Beidam building site, and it's just something that was left from excavation through our effort, our collective effort to create a building.
Interesting. Eva.
Well, I was thinking about the stones that you see on a trail when you're hiking, because that's wayfinding.
Sure.
And then I was also thinking about the glacial deposits. Moraines are like thousands and billions of stones.
Sure.
That actually make topography.
Yeah. And the trail marker stones are there specifically to convey
right.
Someone built it, right? Like if they're if they're not distinctive enough, they don't do their job, right? They don't fulfill their
Well,
purpose.
right, then you get lost.
Right.
Stones are used as well around a fire to keep the fire from going beyond and causing
Sure.
destruction. Stones
Good,
are
yeah.
used to make altars.
Sure. And if you were to find stones in a circle, you might think something along those lines, right? Good.
Stones were used. David used stones to kill Goliath with his slingshot.
Ooh, good one. Yeah, I think mine would be a good slingshot rock.
Yeah.
So, in the rabbi's imagination, reading the rabbis in the Mishnah, there's sort of two possible thoughts that they have when they counter piles of stones, and it sort of breaks down along the lines that we discussed. Although there's a lot more variation than I sort of anticipated. Here's two examples of passages in the Mishnah that refer to a heap of stones and how the rabbis interpret that. So, from Mishnah Avodah Zarah, which is a tractate all about foreign worship, idol worship. They're discussing different kinds of idols, and they're talking about one called an Asherah. So they ask, what is an Asherah? They say, any tree beneath which there is an idol. Rabbi Shimon says, any tree which is worshipped, a different idea. It happened at Sidon. They tell a story of an incident that there was a tree which was worshipped, and they found a heap of stones beneath it. Rabbi Shimon said to them, examine this heap, and they examined it and discovered an image in it. In other words, an idol. He said to them, since it's the image that they worship, we permit this tree for you. In other words, that's the idol. The tree is just a tree in that case. But what's important and useful for our discussion here is here we have a heap of stones that they identify as being deliberate, as intentionally built as either a pagan altar or a pagan, at least something to prop up an icon on, right? To prop up an image on, right? And in a different case, they interpret a pile of stones as precisely the opposite. In Mishnah Baba Metzia, which is a lot about, it's more kind of legal discussion, tort law, things like that. It includes discussion of lost objects, what they call hashevat avidah, returning lost objects, and what you are allowed to keep and what you are obligated to return if you find it. And one of the ways they determine what your obligation is based on where you find the thing that you found. So in this passage, if a person found pigeons tied together behind a fence, don't worry too much about why that would be the case. But if someone found pigeons tied together behind a fence or a hedge or on footpaths in the fields, you may not touch them. In other words, if you find a lost item in a place like behind a fence, that means it's guarded by that fence. Somebody put it there on purpose in order to keep those pigeons from getting away. Or behind a hedge. There again, that serves as a barrier. Someone put it there. Or on footpaths in the fields, that means somebody was walking past there and put it there. If it was away from a footpath in a field, you might presume that that the pigeons were there somehow incidentally. I cut a little bit out, but the important part is this: if he found it in a pile of stones or an old wall, it belongs to him. In other words, he's allowed to keep it. So in this case, a pile of stones means that's nothing. That's nobody. That's a rubble. And if you found it there or an old wall, likewise, that indicates exactly that no one has been there. Just the opposite, right? I want to show you some images of piles of stones. Does anyone recognize this? I'm curious if anyone's sort of Israel knowledge is savvy enough to recognize this place.
Is it the eastern wall or the northern wall?
These are good guesses. This is actually
just the historical excavation site next to the wall.
Good, Ken. Yes. Okay. Yes. So up here to the left, you can see this Mugrabi bridge. So that's a bridge up to the Temple Mount, and on the other side of that is the Kotel Plaza, the Western Wall Plaza. So this is just just south of the
Are
Western
we
Wall.
going?
And yes, this is an archaeological area down here, and where there's been a tremendous amount of excavation. You can see the stones there, and this platform here was constructed several years ago. It's called the Ezrat Yisrael section. It's set up deliberately as an egalitarian prayer section, whereas the Western Wall is gender separated. Anyone can come here and pray. I spent a lot of time there. It was primarily frequented by, well, conservative American rabbinic students and very few Israelis. But in any case, you can see the archaeological park down here with a lot of ruins, large rubble, large blocks. There's another angle on it. So like I said, these are two angles on that prayer space near the archaeological park. So when you look at those stones in the picture, what comes up for you? What sort of emotion words or description words come up when you imagine stones in a pile like this one?
Something's been destroyed.
Good. Destruction. Yeah. What else?
My first thought was they're so big,
Mm.
and then destruction as
Sure.
well.
What happens when you put those two ideas together? Do you know what I mean? Like that, this destruction and the fact that they were so big.
Fear.
Fear. Mm.
It makes me think of like the giant stones in Peru, and the like the respect that I've had for that building of those,
Sure.
Those giant walls with these giant stones, and seeing these next to the people.
Mm.
It brings up for me the magnitude of
Good.
the importance of this place, but it also, I mean, reflecting on what Amy was just saying, the fact that they could destroy it
Yeah.
before, and the idea that a wall like that was breached. I mean, I don't know much about if this is what I'm saying is accurate in terms of this history, but this is before like the major machines we use today.
Right.
Yeah, they make me feel very small too. All of that in comparison physically, but also I couldn't stop the force of the stones coming on down.
Good.
Is this the temple that we are lamenting
Indeed, yes.
for this holiday?
Yep, in Jerusalem. These are. I mean, I'm not enough of an archaeologist to tell you, whether these date to the Second Temple period or what, but they are ruins.
Are they?
They are large and they are near the temple.
No. Could you explain, Rabbi Phil? I know it isn't in your thing, but the green figure who is walking among the stones.
There's
or is that
I think there's sort of a pathway in between. It's sort of two piles, and so that figure, I think she may be wearing a hijab. Yeah. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. I found this picture on the internet. I don't know these people, I'm afraid. But are there other responses, Susan?
Oh, just the immensity of it and the power that would have taken to bring it down.
Mm-hmm. That's what I was thinking too, about the incredible forces that work that must have put this kind of thing there, right?
Yeah.
Lynn, you haven't spoken yet. Go ahead.
Oh, that's what I was going to say too, was the enormous care and effort to make order out of those stones, and then the sort of wanton destruction to bring them down in that way.
Yeah.
Good.
And it's a strong contrast between the wall that's right next to it that looks just as old, that's still standing and looks very sturdy, next to the huge pile of rubble.
Good. And how about Holly? You haven't shared anything yet.
Oh, I the word cataclysm keeps kind of popping into my mind.
Yeah, that's good. I think we can come up with a lot of words. I came up with destruction and obliteration, ruin. Cataclysm is a really good one. Eva, did you want to share something too?
Well, I
I'm just looking at the people off the view.
Yeah, the size of the stones are daunting, and the number of them to make the pile is more daunting. And then to think about humans actually working those, moving them somewhere, or piling them in a different way. It just adds a human dimension that's like incomprehensible to me.
Yeah, yeah. I think you're all seeing what I saw and what I hoped you would see in terms of the magnitude here. And that's really confirmed and reinforced. I pulled a few verses from Eicha, from the Book of Lamentations, that we'll read shortly. And I kind of highlighted some of the key words. They don't say stones exactly, but wall, ramparts, gates, and the words destruction, smashed. I think there's one sunk into the ground. I missed that one, but sunk to the ground. And the elders of Zion who now have dust strewn on their heads. I think that's really a powerful image. Sort of juxtaposing the stone destruction, which produces large stones like this with the small microscopic bits of dust, right? So one way to understand the symbolism of a stone is as a fragment, right? A piece of something that once was, but no longer is, but also perhaps maybe again. I want to explore two other ideas about what stones represent. We have stones as fragments. Here's another piece of stone. Anyone recognize this one? You didn't know there would be a quiz.
Is that Titus's arch?
Very good, Richard. Yes, this is the Arch of Titus in Rome. And there is a relief on the inside. Here's a close-up of the interior of the arch. So this is a relief. There's probably a familiar symbol you recognize there, the menorah, right?
Yeah.
So there's a relief on the inside of that arch depicting the soldiers of Titus returning to Rome with the spoils from the Second Temple, which they destroyed in the year 70. In Rome celebrated this as an indicator of imperial strength. However, in Judaism, this event signifies the last point that the Holy Temple stood. It's the absolute pinnacle, the epitome of destruction. So viewed from the Jews' perspective, the Arch of Titus is not a monument to power at all, or not a monument to the glory of Rome, right? If anything, it's a twist of the knife. It's insult added to injury.
Yeah.
And the arch was constructed, at least according to my cursory research. Again, I'm no archaeologist, but the arch was constructed in the year 81. The temple was destroyed in 70. The arch was destroyed in 81. So about 11 years later. Can you imagine seeing this as a Jew who went through that destruction, who maybe survived the destruction of the temple, and then seeing this monument put up?
Yeah.
I think in all likelihood, the only way that would have really happened was if that Jew was enslaved. But let's imagine nonetheless, or even in that scenario, what might that have felt like?
It kind of makes me think about Native people on our land and what they must feel when they see like a pipeline built through their sacred sites.
Sure. Yeah.
Or Mount
Absolutely.
Rushmore.
Sure. But what are some, can you say some emotion words? What would it feel like?
Total despair.
Yeah.
What else?
Devastated.
Yeah.
Anger.
Anger is good.
Intimidation.
Intimidation, is that what I heard?
Mm-hmm.
Good, yeah.
Well, what's fascinating is that most of us are descended from those Jews who were Ashkenazi. And
yeah. We're still here.
That's the point.
And Rome's not. That's true.
Those people are our literal ancestors.
That's true. We outlived these ones. That's true. You know what it made me think of, actually, specifically, that some of the other things, you know, pipelines on native land, Mount Rushmore. It made me think of things like Confederate statues on city property,
Right.
right? And what that represents to Black Americans. You got one monument, right? The same monument, but multiple perspectives on what it represents. You know, including some for whom, like, you know, you can imagine as a Jew, you know, visiting Rome. I think, you know, these days this is more an object of archaeological interest than something that's really provoking, you know, these kind of raw emotions for us. But you could imagine if you had been through that destruction or were within living memory of it, that's reopening a fresh wound, right? It's a new trauma, seeing that and having it kind of rubbed in your face that way. So the Arch of Titus too is made of stone. So I think another way to understand stones, we have stones as fragments representing destruction, pieces of a whole, but also as monuments, as symbols set up for a deliberate meaning, and a meaning that, you know, a symbol that takes on meaning in relationship both to who put it up, how they intended it, what they intended it to represent, and how it's encountered by folks who weren't the ones who put it up, but who might come across it. One more idea about what stones represent. Recall that both that first image and this one here, these are stones placed on a grave. You may be familiar with this tradition. It's a long venerated Jewish tradition of putting small stones on a headstone, on a gravestone, or you know, whatever sort of marker of a burial site, as a marker of your visit, right? If you go to things like Oskar Schindler's grave in Jerusalem, you'll see it covered in stones, people who visited there. I'm curious, what have you heard about the origin of this custom?
One of the most interesting, I don't know how true it is, but in Zev's book, he mentions that it may have originated from people having grave sites where they wanted to put stones on them to keep animals from digging up bodies.
Huh. That I have not. I've heard many explanations of this. I had not heard that one.
Yeah, Zev's got a lot of weird facts in his book.
I like it. Good. Any other you know, origin stories you've heard for this tradition?
A stone lasts forever and flowers wilt.
Ooh, good, Allison. So you're getting at the, you know, more symbolic than sort of functional meaning, right? I've heard that too, as in terms of, you know, especially juxtaposed with predominant Christian custom of leaving flowers at graves. You know, we sort of leave stones to reflect the permanence of memory, right? The way that lasts while flowers wilt. Good. Any other stories or ideas you've heard, Amy?
Yeah, biblically, Jacob, when Rachel died and she was buried by the side of the road, I think there's a midrash that he left stones there as a marker.
Although that might be the big stone, right? The headstone, as opposed to the little ones on it. But still, you know, stone with stone certainly goes together.
Right.
Yeah. I've heard sort of a folklore explanation that the stones are placed there to weight down a person's soul so it stays put. Also to work the opposite way, apotropeically, to ward off demons. I've also heard that it's a pun. It's a pun on the word tzror, which tzror is a pebble, but it's also we say it in the funerary liturgy, El Malei Rachamim. We ask that our loved one be bound up in the bonds of life. Tzror bitzror hachaim. So bonds and pebble are the same word. And so it's an allusion or a pun there. You get the impression that this is one of those traditions, and it's actually, this is not the only one like this. if we were to do the same exercise, asking what people think, where people think the tradition of breaking a glass at a Jewish wedding, where that comes from, there's a gazillion explanations for that too. This is one of those customs that's so old, whose origin is so, so far back, that, and probably so organic. It's probably something that developed over time, that basically nearly any plausible interpretation can be loaded onto it. So I'm curious, what do the stones mean to you? Allison already shared one idea about their symbolism. Do you identify with that permanence of memory, or do you have other thoughts? What do these stones represent to you?
In my mind, it's an exclusively Jewish custom, though I might be wrong. So when I see stones on a grave, it's either, symbolizing that a Jewish person lived here or is buried here, or even I've seen, secular graves if a Jewish person visits, this is a Jewish person was here. So I always interpret it as a mark of Jewish ritual.
Good. Yeah, I think I'm not sure I'd ever put that into words for myself, but I think the same way, that it's somehow a way of mourning Jewishly.
Yeah.
We visit just like anyone else, but our thing is to leave stones, and just doing it because that's what Jews do, maybe. Yeah. Any other thoughts? What do the stones represent to you?
I heard this story when I was young at a synagogue where there were these two people traveling, and one person did something kind of like wrong to the other, and that person wrote whatever happened into the sand, and then later on that person did a favor for them, and they wrote that into stone, like they etched it into stone. So I kind of think about it being like the holding a memory of something meaningful, and letting the other smaller, more insignificant things go.
Good. Cool. If you could find that story doesn't strike me as familiar, but if you could find it, I'd love to hear it.
I think when I visit the grave of especially somebody who I'm related to or an ancestor, for me, leaving a stone, it makes me feel connected. Like there's some way in which they gave me something, and I'm kind of leaving something of myself, kind of reconnect with them.
I like that too, Sari. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I agree with Sari. I feel like that when I go to visit a grave site and leave a stone on a grave, that it's a marker of the connection and the fact that I'm remembering and visiting with this person and their memory. And if I don't, I'd feel like there was something missing. And it's a way of talking to these people we just have to honor their memory, and we're letting them know we're doing that.
Good. Yeah, I think to combine a little bit of what several people have said, including you, Ken, I think there's something about stones and the stones on graves that is a little bit of a communication, and it's communication both with our loved ones who are no longer with us, and it's also kind of a communication with one another. The way a few people said, there's sort of, another Jew has been there when you see stones on a grave, and you add yours too. And I think in that way that, the stones symbolize something like strength or endurance or perseverance or courage, even to keep going in the face of death. I pulled a few verses here from Bereshit, from Genesis, that struck me as sort of speaking to this idea a little bit too. This is the incident right after Jacob has had the dream about the ladder or the stairway, depending on your translation, the ladder up to heaven, and communicates with God in this dream and has this feeling of God's abiding presence with him. And what he does is he sets up this marker stone. It was the stone that he had slept on, apparently. He put it under his head. He set it up as a pillar, and he anointed it with oil. So we set that up, as it says, the stone which I've set up as a pillar shall be God's abode. And of all that you give me, I shall set aside a tithe for you. Oh, I'm sorry. The important part is right just before that. If God remains with me, if God protects me on this journey that I'm making and gives me bread to eat and clothing to wear, and if I return safe to his Father's house, he's seeking divine presence as reassurance, as strength, as courage, as something to help him fortify himself for what he needs to do. And so that stone, what he sets up as a pillar is almost like a vessel for that, or kind of a communication device, a marker, a reminder to him to be courageous, right?
Yeah, and also I think it connects us to the tradition, which in itself can give us a strength.
Yeah, yeah. That's another angle at the same kind of idea, knowing that there's other people doing this too, and we give each other strength by by communicating to one another through our rocks.
Yes, not only horizontally now, but vertically through the ages. We've been
good.
doing,
Yeah. Absolutely. So, as I said at the beginning, so our existence here today as Jewish people in 2020 is a triumph of our people's spirit. And as we prepare to read from Megillat Eicha, from the Book of Lamentations, which is the quintessential lament for Jewish suffering and hardship, we recall that we recall that not in order to wallow in our grief, but to make meaning from that pain by allowing it to motivate us. The corruption and the folly that once led to downfall can't be allowed to do that again. So we've talked about stones as fragments symbolizing brokenness. So let your stone, the stone you have in your hand, let your stone remind you of brokenness. And we've talked about stones as monuments, symbols. So let your stone be a monument and a symbol for you. Symbolize both your intention in this moment and your perspective in days to come as you look on it again. And we've talked about stones as markers for memory, right? That communicate strength and help us endure and be courageous at difficult times. So let your stones serve as a marker of our shared memory of strength and endurance and spirit in the face of struggle.
No.
And finally, we load onto our stones the raw emotion and the anguish that's evoked by Megillat Eicha. And in that way, what I hope we'll create with our stones is a powerful reminder to ourselves of the transformative power of this ritual. By loading all those different symbolisms, all those reminders, and filling them with our emotional energy, we can make for ourselves a little bit something like the stones on people's graves, but for a greater purpose, a more transformative purpose. At the end, I'll say a few more words about our stones, but it's time to transition into our reading of Megillat Eicha. Amy or Rachel, did you want to say anything before we begin?
I don't have anything. Rach, do you?
No, I don't.
Okay. Then if folks know what to do, as everyone knows the order you're going in and the verses you're reading?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to call up, a version of the text for folks to follow. This is a version put out by Rabbi David Seidenberg. You can find it at neochassid.org, which I love. It's a very visceral and emotionally connecting translation. You should know that, and actually, Rachel, this is relevant to our Rachel Chodor-Reich. This is relevant to what we talked about. It's deliberate, uses gender deliberately. So you'll see a lot of masculine pronouns, including pronouns for God. You're welcome to, if you're reading from this text, to make the pronoun changes. As I said to Rachel, I believe that God's pronouns are God, and God's. But within the sort of poetic sense of Lamentations, gender change and transition from a female voice to a male voice and things like that are deliberate. So that sense is preserved here. As people read, I can I can follow along, and we'll go quietly. I think without saying any more words through all of Megillat Eicha. And you should know there's a tradition at the end to make sure that we end on an uplifting verse. The reader will, when we reach the second to last verse, it's verse 21. I think Amy B will be reading it when we reach verse 21 in chapter 5. The tradition is to read that aloud with the reader. The reader then reads the last verse, and then we repeat the last verse. No, I can't remember. Amy, you remember that exactly how that works, right? There's a reading together, and we end on verse 21. I hope you'll advise us when we get there.
Why don't we can, usually we've just ended together.
Okay, very good. Okay, I think that probably makes sense given the format too.
Okay.
Okay, friends. I'm gonna turn down my lights, and you're welcome to do so as well. And Janity, when you're ready, you can begin.
Okay. Eicha, ישבה ודד העיר, רבתי עם. הייתה כאלמנה רבתי וגויים. זרעתי במדינות, הייתה למס. בכו תבכה בלילה, ודמעתה על לחיה. אין לה מנחם מכל אוהביה, כל רעיה בגדו בה. היו לה לאויבים. גלתה יהודה מעוני ומרוב עבודה. היא ישבה בגויים, לא מצאה מנוח. כל רודפיה השיגוה בין המצרים. דרכי ציון אבלות מבלי באי מועד. כל שעריה שוממים, כהניה נאנחים. בתולותיה נוגות והיא מר לה. היו צריה לראש אויביה שלו. כי אדוני הוגה על רוב פשעיה, עולליה הלכו שבי לפני צר. ויצא מבת ציון כל הדרה, היו שריה כאיילים. לא מצאו מרעה, וילכו ולא כוח לפני רודף. זוכרה ירושלים ימי עניה ומרודיה, כל מחמודיה אשר היו מימי קדם. בנפול עמה ביד צר, ואין עוזר לה. ראוה צרים צחקו על משפטיה. חטא חטאה ירושלים, על כן למידה הייתה כל מכבדיה הזילוה, כי ראו ערוותה. גם היא נאנחה ותשב אחור. טומאתה בשוליה לא זוכרה אחריתה, ותרד בלעים. אין מנחם לה, ראה אדוני את עניי, כי הגדיל אויב. ידעו פרס צר, על כל מחמדיה, כי ראתה גויים באו מקדשה. אשר ציוותה לא יבואו, וקהל לך. כל עמה נאנחים מבקשים לחם. נתנו מחמדיהם באוכל להשיב נפש. ראה אדוני והביטה, כי הייתי זוללה. לא עליכם כל עוברי דרך. הביטו וראו, אם יש מחוב כמחובי, אשר עולה לי, אשר הוגה אדוני. ביום חרון אפו.
From a height, God sent fire in my bones and overwhelmed them. God spread out a net for my feet, turned me, repelled me backward. He made me desolate all day, sickness. The harness of my sings lashed on. They were tied down by God's hand, brought up unto my neck, making my strength fail. Adonai gave me over into such hands that I am unable to stand up. Adonai spurned all my mighty warriors within me. God called out over me a feast for breaking my boys. A winepress Adonai stomped for daughter Judah's girl. Over these I am crying. My eye, she drops water. For so far from me is my comforter, a restorer for my life. My children were decimated, for an enemy overwhelmed, triumphed. Zion spread out with her hands. There is no comforter for her. Adonai commanded for Jacob, surrounding him, his tormentors. Jerusalem became outcast, Nida between them. Righteous is Adonai, for his mouth I rebelled against. Listen, please, all peoples, and see my pain. My girls and my boys walked captive into captivity. I called to my lovers, those deceived me, my priests and my elders. They wasted away in the city, while they sought food for themselves that would bring back their life or soul. See, Adonai, for mine is torment, my guts were churning. My heart overturned within me, for rebelling I rebelled. From outside sword bereaving, in the house, like death itself. They listen, for I am moaning, there is no comforter for me. All my enemies listened for my doom. They rejoiced, for you did it. You brought the day you called for, and let them become like me. May all their evil come before you, and deal to them as you dealt to me for all my sins. For so much are my sighs, and my heart is sickened.
Adonai et Zion, Ishli mishamayim eretz tiferet Yisrael, v'lo zachar Adon raglav bayom ha'poh. Dila Adonai v'lo chama et kol nechot Yaakov haraz b'emarato mivetzorei bad Yehuda הגיע לארץ, חילל ממלכה בשריך, גדל בחוריה, כל קרן ישראל השיב אחור, ימינו מפני אויב, ויבחר ביעקב כאש אהבה, החלה סביב. דלק אשתו כי אויב, ניצב ימינו כי צר, וירוק כל מחמדיהם, באוהל בת ציון. שפק האש חמתו, Hayadonai Kyoye Ilah Yisrael Ilah Kormotecha Shichet Mivetzerav Vayarev Daviet Yehuda Taniyaha Vaniya Vayachmos Kagan Sukkot Shichet Mohado Shikaronai B'tzion Moed V'Shabbat Vayinahat Ditza'amato Melech V'Kohen Tzadnak Adonai Mitzvot Mi'er Mikdashto Iskir B'Yadoyev Hamod Aronoteha Kol Natanu B'Viet Adonai Kayom Ed Hashav Adonai L'Shin Chomat Batzion Natakav Lo Heshiv Yado Mibaleha Yahweh Lechoma Yahadav Umlalu Tavahu Vaharetz Shel Reha Ibahad Vishibahar Biriheha Maha Visareha Vagoyim Ein Torah Gam Neviheha Lamatzahu Chason Me Adonai Yeshavu la'aretz yedavu ziknei Vatzion Elu afar aroshan Hagelu Sakim Horedu la'aretz Roshan Betulot Yerushalayim Kaluvad Mahotenai Hamamaru Mehai Lishapha La'aretz Kavedi Al-Shever Vatamihi Eyateh Oleh V'yoneh B'rechovot Kirya Le'imotam Yomaru Ayedagan Ba'ayim V'hidatafam Kechalal B'rechovotir V'hishtapek Nafsham El Chekimotam Ma'edeh Ma'adamelach Habat Yerushalayim Ma'ashvelach V'nakame B'tulat Batzion Ki Gadol Kayam Shivrek mir yirpala. Leviai. Chazulach shav v'tapel. Elogilu alawone lehashiv shivutei. Vayechezulach masot shav umaduchim. Safaku alaik kapayim. Kol ovre derech sharaku. Vayani urosham habat Yerushalayim. Asot kol ha'ir. Sheyomaru kalilat yofi. Masos lecho haaretz. Patu alaik bihem. Kolo yavai. Sharchu. Vayachar kushein. Amaru ilanu. Akse hayom. Shekivinu matzanu ra'inu. Asadonai asher zamam. Itzaha emrato asher tiva mimekerem. Aras velo chamal. Vaysamach alai oyev. Erim keren sarai. Ta'ak libam el Adonai. Chomat batzion horidi. Chana dima yomam balayla. Atitani fukat la. Atidom patene. Kumi roni balayla. Lirosh ashmurot. Shivchi chamayim libek. Nokak ne Adonai sehi. Elav kapayim. Hanefesh olalai. Atufim bera'av. Berosh chochutzot. Re'ei Adonai v'havita. Lemi olal tako. Im tokal nanashim piryam. Olale tipuchim. Im yeharek. V'mikdash Adonai. Kohen v'navi. Shachavu la'aretz chutzot. Nar v'zakein. V'tulotai uvachurai. Napalu v'charev. Harakta v'yom apeka. Tavachta lo chamalta. Tikra k'yom moed megurai. Misaviv lo haya. V'yom acharonai palit b'sari. Asher tipachti beribiti. Oyevi chila.
I am the man who has seen affliction by the rod of God's wrath. God has led me and made me walk in darkness and not in light. Only against me would God repeatedly turn God's hand the whole day long. God has made me flesh and my skin waste away and has broken my bones. God has built up camps of siege against me and encompassed me with gall and travail. God has made me dwell in darkness like those who are forever dead. He has fenced me in so that I cannot get out. God has made my chains heavy. Though I cry out and plead, God shuts out my prayer. God has walled up my roads with hewn stones. He has made my paths crooked. God is to me a bear lying in wait, a lion in hiding. God scattered thorns on my ways. God caused me to spread my legs apart and made me desolate. God bent God's bow and set me up as a target for the arrow. God has caused the arrows of God's quiver to enter into my reins. I have become the laughingstock of all my people, their song of derision all day long. God has filled me with bitterness. God has sated me with wormwood. Indeed, God has made my teeth grind on gravel and caused me to wallow in ashes. And my soul is far removed from peace. I have forgotten what goodness is. So I said, gone is my life and my expectation from God. Remember my affliction and my misery, wormwood and gall.
Remembering, she will remember my soul and will sink down upon me. Still this, my heart, for so will I hope. Adonai's love, kindness, they are never done, for God's mercies were not used up. They are new by every morning. Great is your trust and faithfulness. My portion is Adonai, said my soul. Therefore, so will I hope for God. Good is Hashem to those waiting for God. To a soul that would seek God, good, and God should wait and be silent. Wait for Hashem's salvation. Good is it for a person that they carry a yoke in their youth. Let them sit alone and be silent, since they laid it upon them. They should put their mouth in the dust. Maybe there is hope. Put out their cheek for the one who strikes. Be satiated with shame. For Adonai would not spurn forever. For if God aggrieved and showed mercy, it is according to God's love abundance. For God did not afflict from God's heart and aggrieve human beings.
To crush under God's feet all imprisoned of the land, to make bent a man's judgment right to the face of the highest, to twist, to wrong a person in their struggle. Wouldn't Adonai see that? Who is this who spoke, and it was? Didn't Adonai so command? From the mouth of the highest don't the evils and the good come out? How could a living person complain? A person if punished for their sins? Let us search our ways and dig deep, and let us return until Adonai. Let us lift our hearts up to our hands, stretching them toward God in the heavens. Us, we sinned and rebelled. You did not pardon. You took shelter in such anger, and you would pursue us. You murdered without pitying. You sheltered yourself within a cloud far beyond prayer. Scum and refuse you would make us in the midst of the peoples. All our enemies crack open their mouth against us. Trepidation and trap were ours, the ruination and the shattering. My eyes drop floods of water for my daughter people's shattering. My eyes streams and won't silence herself. She cries with no breaks, no stutters, until Adonai would look down and see from heaven. My eye doles sorrow to my soul over all my city's daughters.
So it's Aduni, Katsipur, Oibechinom, Zamtu, Faborchayai, Yadu Ebenbi, Zapur Mayim al Roshi, Martin Nigzarti. Karati Shimcha Adonai, Mibor Tahtiot, Koli Shamata Al Ta'alem Aznecha, Lerov Chati L'Shavati, Karavti Bayom Ekraicha Amarta Al Tira, Rabta Hashem, Rivei Nafshi, Ga'alta Chayai, Ra'ita Hashem, Avatati Shavta Mishpati, Ra'ita Kol Nikmatam, Kol Machshavotamli, Shamata Herpatam Hashem, Kol Machshavotam Alai, Sifte Kame B'Chagyonam Ale Kol Hayom, Shivtam B'Kamatam Habitam Ani Manginatam, Tashiv Lahem Gamul Adonai Kol Kama Ase Yadehem, Ditain Lahem Maginat Lev, Te'altecha Lahem, Tirdof Be'af, Betashmideim, Mitachat Shemei Adonai.
Eicha Yuam Zachav Yishnei Haketim Hatov Tishtapechna Avnei Kodesh Barosh Kol Chutzot B'nei Tzion Haikarim Hamsulaim Bahapas Eicha Nishtavu Lenivle Heres Maaseh Yedei Yotzer Gam Tanim Haltzu Shahad Heniku Kurehen Bat Ami Leachzar Ka'enim Bamidbar Dabak Lashon Yonek Elhiku Batsama Olalihim Sha'alu Lechem Pores Ein Lahem Ha'ochlim Lama'adanim Nashamu Bachutzot Ha'emunim Alei Tolah Hibku Ashpatot Vayigdal Avon Bat Amihi Machatat Sidom Ahapuka Kamoraga V'lo Haluva Yadayim Zakunizireha Mihi Shelek Zahu Michalav Admu Etzem Mitninim Sapir Gizratam Hashach Mishhor Ta'avraham Lonigru Bachutzot Safad Oraham Al Atzmaha Yavesh היה כעץ. טובים היו הללי הרב, מחללי רעב. שהם יעזובו מדוכרים מתנובות שדי. ידי נשים רחמניות בישלו ילדיהן. היו לברות לעמו בשבר בת עמי. כי לאדוני את אמתו שפך חרון אפו, ויצאת אש בציון, ותאכל יסודותיך.
לא האמינו מלכי ארץ, כל יושבי תבל, כי יבוא צר ואויב בשערי ירושלים. מחטות נביאיה, עוונות כהניה, השפכים בקרבה דם צדיקים. נעו עברים בחוצות, נגואלו בדם, ולא יוכלו יגעו בלבושיהם. סורו טמא קראו למו, סורו אל תיגעו, כי נצו גם נעו. אמרו בגויים לא יוסיפו לגור, פני אדוני חלקם לא יוסיף להביטם. פני כהנים לא נשאו, וזקנים לא חננו. עודנו תכלנה עינינו, אל עזרתנו אבל, בציפייתנו ציפינו, אל גוי לא יושיע. סעדו צעדינו מלכת ברחובותינו, קרא קיצנו, מלאו ימינו, קיווה קיצנו. קלים היו רודפנו, מנשרי שמיים. על ההרים דלקונו, במדבר ערבו לנו. רוח אפינו, משיח אדוני, נלכד משחיתותם. אשר אדמרנו, בצילו נחיה בגויים. שישי ושמחי בת אדום, יושבת בארץ עוז. גם עלייך תעבר כוס, תשכרי ותתארי. תם עוונך בציון, לא יוסיף בהגלותך. פקד עוונך בד אדום, הילה חטאותייך.
זכור אדוני מהיה לנו הביטה, וראה את הרפתנו, נחלתנו נהפכה לזרים, בתינו לנחרים. יתומי חיינו ואין אב, עמיתנו כאמנות. ממנו בכסף שתינו, עצנו במחיר יבואנו. על צווארנו נרדפנו, יגענו ולא נחלנו. מצרים נתנו יד, אסור לשבוע לכם. אבותינו חטאו ואינם, ואנחנו אבותיהם סבלנו. עבדים משלו בנו עוברי עץ מידם. בנפשנו נביא לחמנו מפני חרב המדבר. עברנו כתנור נחמרו מפני זלעפות רעב. נשים בציון עינו בתולות בעברי יהודה. זרים בידם נתלו, פני זקנים לא נדרו. בחורים תכון נשאו ונערים בעץ כשלו. זקנים משער שבתו, בתורים מנגינתם. שבת מסוף ליבנו, נהפך באבל וחולנו. נפלה עטרת ראשנו, אוי נא לנו כי חטאנו. על זה היתווה ליבנו, על צלם אשכו עינינו. על הר ציון תשמם, שועלים ילכו בו. אתה אדוני לעולם תשב, כיסאך לדור ודור. למה לנצח תשכחנו, תעזבנו לעורף ימים. השיבנו אדוני אליך ונשובה, חדש ימינו וקדם. כי אם מעוז מאזתנו, כקפצה עליך עד מאוד. השיבנו אדוני אליך ונשובה, חדש ימינו וקדם.
Thank you, everyone who read in your own ways. Very much appreciated. I want to share one more piece. This is it. There we go. So one other tradition following the reading of Eicha is what are called keynote, additional laments. And I'd like to read one. You can see it arranged artistically here, but it's from a rabbi named Rabbi Evan Crame called Remember. And it's part of a series or a compilation creating keynotes and other texts for Tisha B'Av as experienced in the COVID-19 era. They're calling it Megillat COVID. This is Remember. God, remember what we had. Consider and see our situation. Our future went to strangers, our houses no refuge. We are like orphans without a leader. Our mothers worry like widows. Money flowed like water. We burned through earth's resources. But our necks bore a heavy burden. We were weary. We had no rest. We sought comfort from adversaries and provisions from our rivals. Generations have sinned before you. Children pay for the crimes. We were slaves to our egos in the grip of our greed. Our souls carried our cravings before the edge of despair. Now we hide from the fever, from the delirium of our yearnings. Women have been victims, anti-Semitism recurring. Noble leaders were sacrificed, and our elders have fallen. Black folk have been divested, their young people scared for their lives. Seniors hide behind their doors. Children stay at home from school. Hearts have stopped. Our joy is fleeting. No dancing at weddings. We crowned ourselves invincible. That was our fatal sin. Hearts were sickened with disease. Eyes are darkened with distress. From this bottom we can rise. Remember, Israel once was desolate. God is gracious and eternal. God's creation can survive this. Don't forget us. Don't abandon your creation and our future. Turn us toward you, our God. Renew our days like before. If we excluded you from our lives, don't reject us. Don't be angry. Don't forget us. Don't abandon your creation and our future. One final note to conclude our evening observing Tisha B'Av, which is an invitation to recall that stone you've held in your hands this whole time, through this whole experience. I invite you afterwards, maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow, sometime on the day of Tisha B'Av, take your stone and put it somewhere as you would on a gravestone, somewhere where it won't be disturbed, where it won't be moved. It would be ideal if it's also somewhere you'll see it sometimes, and in that way be reminded of the experience we went through tonight. And let it rest there as a symbol, as a marker, as a reminder of brokenness, and a reminder of strength, communicator of courage. Although we may not regret the absence of a holy temple in Jerusalem where priests offered up sacrifices, when we recall how the city of Jerusalem was razed and the people of Judea were killed, carted off as slaves, the memory triggers in us our suffering. As a people, Jews carry within ourselves the wounds and scars of a multitude of catastrophes that need not be listed. As individuals, we experience physical and emotional assaults, oppression, discrimination for our religion, our ethnicity, our color, gender identity, our sexual orientation. News reports daily describe mass murder, unspeakable devastation across the globe. Accounts that may remind us of descriptions of Jerusalem's destruction. There is urgent reason to worry about the changes in climate that our children and grandchildren will endure. We live in a world where the Holy Temple, in whatever metaphorical meaning we assign to that term, is in ruins. It's okay to grieve for all of that brokenness. There is much cause to grieve. And yet, we read Eicha, Lamentations, and we observe Tisha B'Av, not in order to focus on the past, but rather to gain strength to confront the present. Thank you all for joining together with me and with all of us this evening. Thank you to all our readers who read aloud in English and in Hebrew and chanted the mournful trope of Megillat Eicha. Thank you to Rachel and Amy and Susan for putting together the list of readers and for sending out those advanced emails with learning and insight to prepare for this evening. Thank you all for engaging in a new original ritual with me. I hope you found it meaningful, and if you have feedback, I'll be interested to hear it. I want to wish everyone who is fasting a meaningful fast, and everyone a meaningful day of reflection tonight and tomorrow, an intentional day of mourning for everyone. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Rabbi Phil.
Of course. Good night, friends.